Good evening, Indiana. Welcome to the Who's Left Podcast, a show about Indiana politics, history, and culture from an unapologetically leftist perspective. My name is Scott Aaron Rogers, and I'm broadcasting from Bloomington. Tonight, I am honored to bring you a very special guest. Sheila Kennedy is Emerita Professor of Law and Public Policy at the School of Public and Environmental Affairs at Indiana University, Indianapolis. Until her retirement in December of 2020, she was a faculty fellow with both the Center for Religion and American Culture and the Tobias Center for Leadership Excellence, an adjunct professor of political science and founder of the Center for Civic Literacy at IU Indy. Professor Kennedy holds a BS from IU and also received her JD with honors from Indiana University in 1975, where she was managing editor of the Indiana Law Review. She practiced real estate, administrative and business law in Indianapolis, and served as Corporation Counsel for the city from 1977 to 1980. In 1980, she was the Republican candidate for Indiana's then 11th congressional district seat. Professor Kennedy was president of Kennedy Development Services from 1987 to 92 when she became executive director of the Indiana affiliate of the ACLU. She joined the faculty of the School of Public and Environmental Affairs in 1998. Ms. Kennedy is the author of 10 books and has published numerous book chapters and articles in scholarly journals and law reviews. She has been a columnist for the Indianapolis Star, Inequality.org, the Indiana Word, and the Indianapolis Business Journal. She blogs daily at SheilaKennedy.net and is a frequent contributor to other blogs and periodicals. Tonight, we will talk about a long life in Indiana politics, policy, and public service. She has seen it all and is perhaps better than just about anyone else in the state, able to provide insight into how we got here and how, or if, we might make it through. But before we get there, you know the routine. This is an independent media project. We don't paywall content. We don't have advertisers, and we certainly don't have any billionaire benefactors. Only individuals like you keep this thing going. It is a foundational principle of Who's Left and the Progressive Indiana Network that we refuse to hide important information behind paywalls in the middle of a political crisis, even if that's not in our financial best interest. So please, if you find value in this work, and it is a lot of work, go to progressiveindiana.net and subscribe at the paid level. It's only $5 a month or $50 a year to help us build the infrastructure that will pop the right-wing media bubble in this state. And if a paid subscription isn't in the cards for you right now, that's okay. You can help out by liking and sharing on social media, commenting, leaving reviews, providing feedback, and forwarding our content to your people. You get us when you can. Mostly, we just want you here in this community of Hoosiers dedicated to making this state and its government work for all of us, not just the elite few. Please join us. You can follow me on Blue Sky, Instagram, and Threads at whosleft.us and on Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube at Who's Left. That's HOOS Left. Progressive Indiana Network's handle is the full spelled out name on most sites, but on Blue Sky and TikTok, it is PIN Indiana. Please help us grow with a follow wherever you're at. Tell the others. Let's build a radically democratic Indiana together. Now, let's welcome our very special guest. There's Professor Sheila Kennedy. Professor Kennedy, welcome.
Thank you.
I really appreciate you being here tonight. Did I miss anything in the extensive biography?
No, and that's a much longer introduction than I'm used to, so thank you.
Listen, what do you leave out there? You've done so much in your life, and it's really a pleasure to have you here. I feel like you've got insight to offer all of us Hoosiers because you've sort of seen where we've been, how we got here, and maybe you can provide us some insight into what we can do to either get out of this thing or build something better on the other side.
Well, I hope so. My insights come from the fact that I'm very old and I've lived a long time, and I was born in Indianapolis and I will die in Indiana.
I believe it was John Mellencamp who said, they'll probably bury me in a small town, although Indianapolis, not a small town. So, listen, I'm glad you said it. I didn't. You've lived a very long life. And with that, much insight. We talked about this briefly when we scheduled this show. God, was it last month? I don't even know what is time, but um, I brought up the William Strauss and Neil Howe generational theory framework. And for those who don't know, Tom Hartman, the godfather of progressive radio and media in this country right now, talks about this relatively frequently. And they have this theory that Anglo-American history sort of moves in recurring 80 to 100 year about cycles. They call it a saeculum. It's a Latin word. The Romans used it for roughly the span of living memory, and that sort of ties in with this great quote from a British historian named Arnold Toynbee, who says when the last man who remembers the last great crisis dies, the next great crisis becomes inevitable. And Sheila, may I call you Sheila?
Oh, certainly.
Your life situates neatly in between these two crisis periods. You were not around for the last one, the Great Depression, World War II. The saeculum before that was the Civil War, before that the American Revolution. You can trace this thing back into British history, if you want, but there's this sort of cyclical nature to things, and within that 80-year cycles, you've got a cycle within the cycle, right? You've got the sort of spring, summer, autumn, and winter of about 20 to 25-year periods within that. And so I don't know, can you tell us about the springtime of young Sheila in Indianapolis, in post-war Indiana?
Sure. But I should mention that I was raised in Anderson, which is a small town, and they better not bury me there. But at any rate, my father fought in World War II, and my earliest recollection was being in kindergarten when the war was over. So while I don't have vivid memories of politics back then, I did begin my lengthy life right during World War II. And growing up in Anderson, my first recollection that was political was of the House Un-American Activities Committee and the hunt for those left-wing communists who were behind every Bush, evidently. And it was a scary time, even for a relatively young child.
Well, and it's interesting that you bring that up as sort of your first political memories, because I'm looking at now, and you think of this MAGA, Make America Great Again crowd, and I think generally that post-war era when America was at the top of the world, the superpower, just us and the Soviet Union kind of left standing after the war. And mind you, the Soviets, millions and millions of Russians died fighting that war, and they were decimated in many ways. But it was really only America that was basically unscathed in that war, and they point to this period as sort of this utopian ideal. And the first thing that comes to mind is a tension in that.
Not only that, and it was much later when I looked back at that period and recognized it, but we were on top of the world, but we were white, predominantly Christian, which I was not. And, it was not a great time to be either a person of color or a woman, for that matter. I know that, when I was older, we're now in one of those secondary times that I remember reading Betty Friedan's book about the disease that had no name, or the problem that women were routinely expected to be in the kitchen, and many of them were, and they were drinking there, as I recall. But
Your mommy's little helper, right?
When I went to law school, people said, well, your children will all be on drugs. I mean, when I went to law school, there were very few women in law school, and it was certainly not considered a feminine thing to do. Uh, you know, we look back at those early periods, and yes, the American economy was doing well. We were top. I mean, we hadn't been decimated in the way that Europe was during the war, but we were anything but a an equal society. And uh, so when you look back, one of the things that pisses me off so much about MAGA, excuse my language, which gets much worse, by the way.
Hey, we
Yeah, I
love
mean,
it. We love it. You
I
do whatever you
I
want.
was the F-bomb professor when I was on faculty, but you know, we look back at these times through these rose-colored glasses. We look back, as one scholar has put it, to a time that never was. Uh, yes, there were wonderful things about the post-war period, certainly economically. The, when you look back, though, the uh, oh, now the senility's getting me. Uh, the national uh, program that helped returning soldiers,
Oh,
the
the
GI
GI
Bill.
Bill. Yeah.
I'm at the stage of life where you have to reach for the words,
Mhm.
but the GI Bill only was only available to white guys. I mean,
Mhm.
if you take a more critical look at those rosy periods, which of course MAGA does not, because all they care about was the fact that it was a time in our society when straight white Christian men ruled the roost. And that's really what they would like to take us back to. But there were wonderful things about the period, but there were also some real negatives.
Well, listen, I'm guilty of this in many ways myself. I consider myself an
A
FDR
straight white
style
Christian
Democrat.
guy.
Oh, two out of three, right? But so, but the New Deal, and I think about that, and the economic
Yeah.
opportunity and strong union protections
Oh,
and
yes.
a high marginal tax rate, and
Yeah.
the things we did then, and you speak to the tensions within that era and how it was not complete, it was not for everybody, but it, there was movement in that direction, right? Like we were
Yes.
on the upward swing. There was the civil rights movement
Yes.
and people were gaining more rights. And then, we get to the late 60s and early 70s, and um, we start to see that era, that change, like back to Strauss and Howe, they would call that the awakening, right? And it sort of goes both ways. Folks were realizing the incompletion, or the shortcomings rather, of the New Deal era, and so we saw the students and minorities and the gay rights movement, and you name it, and folks saying, hey, why can't we get in on some of that? But then on the other hand, you have your Nixon, your Southern strategy,
Yeah.
and the immediate pushback to that. So things start to sort of go off in two different directions. By 1968, 1972, even.
That was a period, first of all, as I mentioned to you before, I was pushing out babies and diapering a lot. So my understanding of the upheavals of the 60s, which really were the late 60s, early 70s, was what you saw on television. And, I was this nice suburban white mommy, so my actual experience of that period was through the media. It wasn't personal, but it was a time of incredible upheaval. And and you're right. I mean, I lived through the civil rights movement, the gay rights movement, the women's movement, I mean, all of those things were bubbling up because people, and the theoretical construct that you're working from, it would say there was an awakening. But I think what we were doing up to that point and even after was trying to make a politics that lived up to the really remarkable aspirations of our constitutional system, of the Declaration, the Bill of Rights, the Constitution. And it was aspirational. Today, of course, we have a huge movement that doesn't share those aspirations at all. And that I find very frightening.
I want to talk about sort of the origins of this movement, the MAGA movement, and it sort of comes out of that era, that tension, I feel like. And we talk about Nixon and the Southern strategy, and what they were doing was essentially luring white Southern conservatives who had been a part of the New Deal coalition. They benefited from the economic.
Been Democrat. They were the Dixiecrats. Yeah.
Yes, exactly. And with our two-party system, we talked about it. The neither party is a monolith. I sort of view it as just like two battleships in like this eternal struggle. And occasionally you get, some folks walk across the gangplank from one to the other when they get tired of the ship they're on. In response to the civil rights movement, those Dixiecrats jumped ship over to the Republican battleship, as it were. But now at this point, they're all that's left. They control that entire mechanism. They've gnawed through the hull.
Now, as you pointed out in that very, very nice introduction, I was a Republican for 35 years. I ran for Congress as a Republican. I served in a Republican administration. I guarantee you that Bill Hudnett is rotating in his grave, and so is Dick Lugar. The party that I belonged to no longer exists. And you are correct that for most of American history, it's certainly my understanding of it, was we had two parties that were fairly commodious big tents. I was always a fairly liberal Republican, but I was certainly within a Republican mainstream back in those days. Today, what I find so concerning, terrifying, is the fact that we no longer have two actual political parties. The Democrats are still a political party, huge tent because everybody who's sane is in it. And we have, instead of the Republican Party I once belonged to, we have a cult. It's a fascist, racist, anti-Semitic, anti-female cult. And there is no big tent to it. I mean, it is all about devotion to whatever they think the cause is. And then so what we've got right now is an incredibly atypical political situation. And I think it's really hard in a country that only has two major political parties. If we had I have a granddaughter who lives in England, and we talked today, and she was telling me that she's annoyed with the Liberal Party that she belonged to, the Labour Party that she belonged to. Mm-hmm. And so she's now in the Green Party because it's more, well, she's got those options. We do not. So what we have right now, and I get annoyed when people bitch about the inability of Democrats to have a coherent messaging strategy. Well, shit, how do you, I think I've said it's like herding cats. You've got people like the Republicans that I once worked with who are appalled by what the Republican Party has become, but they're genuine conservatives, not fascists, and so they're voting Democrat essentially because they feel they have no choice. And then you've got a political spectrum that goes all the way to the left. which in America, despite all the rhetoric, is not very far left, really. But at any rate, it's certainly not it's not the left that you see in Europe. But it's still a broad spectrum of political philosophy. And how you message to people who are scattered along that spectrum, I certainly have no idea. But I mean, so we are in an incredibly atypical time because we do not have two legitimate political parties. We have a cult and we have the Democrats.
Those two battleships in eternal struggle, right? That, you know, from conservative to progressive, they both existed within the framework of liberal democracy. And I think as the word liberal became a naughty word amongst conservatives, they abandoned that entire project. And I always like to say the opposite of liberal is not conservative, it's illiberal.
Yes. Yeah, no. Well, you mentioned that I founded something called the Center for Civic Literacy. One of the problems we have in this country is very few people understand. There was a wonderful headline once that said, Americans revere the Constitution, have no idea what's in it. And that's really where we are. We've got people who do not understand what our system is, and they don't understand liberal in the historic sense of that term. And we are in that historic sense of a liberal constitutional structure, if we can keep it, which
we invented it, right? Basically, at least in the modern sense.
Yes. And I mean, so we're at a time right now that I don't think we've ever been in. I mean, I really, at our worst, there was always, as I said earlier, a sort of an aspiration to live up to, you know, all people are created equal. All the things that the founders, with all of their negatives, and we all know with hindsight, but they were pretty smart people, and they were liberal in the very good sense of that term. And they set out a system that for a very long time, even the people who weren't living up to it at least gave lip service to. We're not there right now. I mean, the MAGA Republicans are giving lip service to Hitler. I mean, this is really frightening.
They were always there, though, right? I mean, these are your Confederates, right? And after the Civil War and Reconstruction, it was sort of a aborted project. We didn't see it through to completion. So, you know, that class of Southern racists came back and, you know, continued to exist and run things there in their little walled garden, as it were. And then even if you forward to the 30s and, you know, that saculum, right? There were those folks there. We don't talk about them a lot now, but there were people who wanted us to enter that war on the side of the Germans. There were silver shirts, and there was the German American Bund and all those folks. And these are the people who they laid low during the war, but they kind of popped right back up as the McCarthyites, right?
Yes. No, they have always been with us. And when I was a Republican, they were pretty much kept on the fringe, but we always knew they were there. They are no longer the fringe. They're the, you know, but no, that what I have found so disheartening is the fact that, yes, you're exactly right. I knew they were there. But if you had asked me 15 years ago, what percentage of the American public, because all racists weren't in the South, you know, I mean, they were everywhere. But my sense would have been that maybe 15% of us, if the survey research is correct, and I have no reason to believe it isn't because all of the polling shows pretty much the same thing, about 30% of Americans
Mm-hmm.
are, you know, either, my youngest son, after Trump was elected the first time, he said, well, Mom, there were two kinds of people who voted for Donald Trump, and only two kinds. The ones for whom the racism really resonated, and those for whom it was not disqualifying.
Yep.
And, anyway.
Well, I guess let's talk about that. I mean, I have this theory that the Southern conservatives and the religious fanatics that kind of took over the Republican Party, beginning, with that Southern strategy as those rats jumped from one ship to the other, right? That they slowly drove out liberal Republicans like yourself. And everybody sort of had their breaking point. This isn't just like a seesaw where all the rats jump on at once and other people like flung to the other side. Everybody has their breaking point. What was yours?
Believe it or not, in 2000, I officially left the Republican Party because I thought that George W. was the bottom of the barrel. I thought this is, I have to tell you, my husband and I met. We were in the Republican administration of Bill Hudnut. And when we were getting married, we had reporters back then who actually covered City Hall. And one of them said to me, well, the press corps really likes you guys, but you are kind of right of center. And we stood still, and I am now a communist. I mean, my political philosophy really is very consistent with what it's always been. I've changed position on some issues as I've learned more, but in terms of a basic classical liberal political philosophy, I stood still. But the Overton window shifted. And I remember during the first year or so of George W.'s presidency, my husband and I standing up in the morning in the bedroom, and I forget what news item triggered this. And we said, oh my God, I mean, what is happening? This is ridiculous. And I officially left the Republican Party. The Stonewall Democrats had a coming out party for me, which I thought was very sweet. They raised $8,000. But I mean, I thought we're never going to, this is rock bottom. Right now, I look back at George W. and I'm almost fond of him. I mean, it has gotten so much worse.
Yeah. This is a guy who, listen, war criminal, let's say it, but like it compared to Donald Trump, oh, he's the kindly old grandpa with the butterscotch in his pocket. He makes fun, cute paintings, right? Like, but you were the director of the ACLU in Indiana, 1992, still as a Republican. It's hard to fathom now.
Well, it is now, but back then, the morphing into what it is today was just beginning. And I have always been a civil libertarian because I like our Constitution. I particularly like the Bill of Rights. It was interesting to see Nouveau, which was an alternate newspaper back then, and it was printed on real paper for people who can't conceive of that these days.
Listen, I'm not that young. I'm old enough to remember.
But they had a huge headline that said ICLU, which was what we called it then, the Indiana Civil Liberties Union, taken over by card-carrying Republican. I mean, it shocked some people, but not. I mean, there were lots of Republicans who were members of the Civil Liberties Union. I don't know. Well, anyway, it was not, the entire political landscape has shifted in ways that I would never have anticipated.
I think about the seasons of Indiana over the last, 80
Hmm.
odd years, and sort of think of the various Hoosier figures as avatars for their various season. I think of that New Deal era, and I think of Birch Bayh, right?
Sure.
And I think of that generation afterward, and even though they were almost the same age, actually, I think of Richard Lugar, who sort of came to political prominence just after. He was first elected to the Senate in 1976, I believe. Overlapped with Birch Bayh there for a couple years, and
Hmm.
wound up overlapping with his son later on.
Yeah.
And he's an interesting bridge figure. Like they don't make him like Richard Lugar anymore.
No. And I had my differences with Lugar. He was, especially on issues of choice, but he was a brilliant and thoughtful and ethical person, and he was certainly incredibly influential on keeping weapons, you know,
Mhm.
internationally, and keeping weapons down. I mean, but Dick, I got my political start. I was head of something called the 71 Committee for Lugar for Mayor back when he ran for mayor. And that was a euphemism for Jews for Lugar. But uh, I worked for him politically. And of course, I worked in uh, Bill Hudnut's not only his campaign, but in his administration. Um, and these, they are people who have absolutely nothing to do with the GOP that exists today.
When I think of the sort of the next turning into the autumn, as it were, I don't know necessarily when to pinpoint it, but I kind of like come down to the early 90s and the fall of the Soviet Union, and there was nothing anymore. There was no other superpower to kind of keep America and American capitalism in particular in check,
Hmm.
and the free market sort of has run rampant ever since. And so for me, the avatar of that era becomes Evan Bayh, as we mentioned, as the Democrats sort of took a more market oriented turn.
I will tell you that I was one of the people who roasted Andy Jacobs when he retired from Congress, and I had run against him. And there was a room full of Democrats, including Evan. And the best laugh I've ever gotten in my life was when I said that I wanted to apologize to Andy because I had called him a name. I'd called him a Democrat. And that was before I realized that in Indiana, we don't have Democrats. We have our Republicans, because I was still a Republican, and yours, like Evan Bayh. And everybody laughed because, and Evan was sitting there. Evan Bayh, I was nothing like his father. And my sense of him was always that he, let's see which way the wind is blowing, and I will be. I mean, I saw absolutely nothing stable about or a philosophy there. It was what politics has come to be. When I look at, for example, Indiana's two senators today, uh, Todd Young is obviously intelligent. Jim Banks is insane. But Young knows better. And he reminds me of Bayh in that sense, because we've got this whole generation now of politicians who clearly put keeping their position above the common good, above doing their job, above uh, taking their oath of office seriously. And to me, Evan was the beginning of that.
Uh, yeah, I'm glad I landed on him because yeah, it really does seem like the perfect avatar of the autumn of this saculum, and
Yes.
which Strauss and Howe called the unraveling, and
Yeah.
it's sort of the the complete decimation, the complete undoing of the New Deal era and all the economic protections and um, doing something about wealth inequality and
Yeah.
figures like Evan Bayh and plenty and Bill Clinton, plenty of other blue dog Democrats were right there with the Republicans on the take, doing the bidding, doing the work of the business class. And so you get this sort of cynicism in the population, this, oh, both parties are the same sort of
Yeah.
thing. And so you wind up with figures who have a strong vision for what they want to do afterwards that plant the seed for some sort of thing that comes next. Now, it's not always a great vision, but it is a vision. And I think of a figure like Mike Pence as the avatar of that of the winter of our discontent here in Indiana. Now it's ironic that they wanted to hang him, but he was early in articulating that sort of Christian nationalist vision
Yes.
that has become MAGA, I think.
Yeah. At least he was polite. You can't say that for the guys now. No, I mean, yeah. When I ran for Congress, Mike was running that year. We both lost. And periodically he would have his good friend Sheila on his radio call-in show, TV call-in show, whatever it was. And my husband would, because he's a good husband, would listen. And when I would get home, he'd say, that guy is really, and I would say, oh, honey, he's just, because it was easier back then to dismiss the Christian nationalist stuff. He was still sort of the leading edge of that. And I find it really interesting that he did at the end refuse to do Trump's bidding and violate the Constitution. And I give him big props for that. I mean, that's the only thing I can say about him that I liked. But that took guts, and it was the right thing to do. I'm not sure that those who have followed in his Christian nationalist footsteps would bother.
Well, yeah, I mean, you think of folks like now here in Indiana, for example, Micah Beckwith. You think of Todd Rokita. You mentioned Jim Banks. I don't think Mike Braun actually falls into that bucket. I think he is more of a Todd Young, Evan Bayh sort of figure. He just sticks his finger in the air, and he doesn't really believe in much of anything other than making
himself
more money. Yeah. And so I guess for all of the problems, and there are, where to even begin with their Christian nationalist vision and Project 2025. We talked about it a little bit before we went live here this evening. They've got a 900-page policy playbook. They have a vision. It's horrific, but they believe in something. I guess having seen all of this, all of these seasons, where is the Democratic vision? What do we need to be thinking about? How do we counter this? What is the equal weight on the seesaw to balance things, or even better, a 2-ton anvil to drop on the seesaw and fling these Christian nationalists out to sea?
I think that there are two answers to that. One is for Indiana, which is an interesting state. We are so gerrymandered that I think, well, I'll go back to that, but I think nationally, because I really am essentially a positive person, I really think that we are going to see an enormous blue wave in the midterm, and that Trump's constant efforts to rig that or cancel it aren't going to go anywhere. But although he may at the margins suppress some votes, I would like to see the National Democratic Party, first of all, get rid of people my age, and there's a there's a really impressive bench of younger people, but I really think we need something along the lines of the Nuremberg trials. I mean, things have become so corrupt. You mentioned market and capitalism as though, oh, well, we've got too much capitalism. We don't have any capitalism. We have corporatism. Genuine capitalism requires markets. I consider myself a big capitalist, actually. But you have to regulate the economy to ensure that people are competing on a level playing field. And that's not what we've got at all. Corporatism is the capture of the government by the wealthy, which is essentially what we've got. We've got we have not been enforcing our rules about my language skills are bad again because I'm
antitrust.
Old. Yeah. Thank you. I mean, we have not kept that level playing field for market, and of course, we also have not understood that there are some parts of the economy that markets aren't appropriate for, like healthcare. But that, a really healthy market economy is great for everybody. It does raise, but if the markets are limited to the areas that markets work in, primarily goods and services that people need, and not things like healthcare. I think that the Democratic Party needs to clean house in the sense of having something like the Nuremberg trials, where you make it so obvious that all of these people have been corrupt and been, and make it so that all of the folks who live in their little self-enclosed bubbles because we've got so many places where people can go to find the news that they prefer. We allow people now to curate their own realities. So if we had something that just overtook all of the news media, that was impossible for people to hide behind and only watch Fox News or some of these others, and just brought into the public the degree of corruption and venality that we are seeing, I think then we can take a look at policy. And again, I don't think we're never going to go back to the structural problems that got us here. We need some incredible. We need to get rid of gerrymandering. We need to get rid of the filibuster. I mean, I've got a list, but at any rate, that's national. In Indiana, we have got to do something about the gerrymandering, and I know that this is a pro-democratic podcast.
Oh, but believe me, I hit them as much as I hit the Republicans, it seems.
What I think is going to be very interesting, I'm sure you have heard that Greg Ballard is running as an independent for Secretary of State. There's a group called Independent Indiana that has decided that Indiana is not really a red state, it is a non-competitive state. And that in rural Indiana, there are just too many people who are not happy with the Republicans in office, but think God will kill them if they vote Democrat. If I pull the devil, well, it's not a lever anymore. But if I vote Democratic, that I've lost it all, whatever. But they'll vote for an independent. And I think that the emergence of this new independent party in Indiana will give permission to a lot of the people. What we have here, the gerrymandering has basically been a very sophisticated form of vote suppression. If you are in a town or whatever the political subdivision is, and you're convinced that the Republican's going to win anyway, why should you bother? We have the worst turnout. We are next to the last in turnout in Indiana in the entire country. And that's because people think, well, and in all fairness, the Democrats in many, many cases haven't even bothered to run someone in some of these districts that they've said, well, it's a Republican district, we'll just give it up. Well, why should somebody turn out if there's nobody even running? One year in one of my classes, one of my graduate classes, I had this. I know this will come as a shock to you because I'm so calm, but before each election, I would go into sermon mode. Are you all registered? If you bring me those little things that say I vote, I'll give you extra credit, whatever. Are you all voting? And one of my better students raised his hand and he said, Professor, I always vote, but I live in Noblesville. He said, and I went online to make sure that my polling place was the same. And when I thought, well, I'm online, I'll look at the ballot. And there was no competition. Why should I go? I have no answer to that. I mean, it's a perfectly rational question. We need to shake things up in Indiana. And since it's obvious that we're not going to get rid of gerrymandering at the state level, we have to wait for the Democrats to take over Congress and pass the John Lewis Act. But right now, the best way to get rid of this theory that there's nothing that the Democrats or anyone else can do is to have an independent group running in selected areas and giving people a choice. Now, I did hear, and I was really pleased to hear it, that the Democrats are running someone everywhere this time, which is new and exciting. Because
it
at
is.
least you're giving people a choice.
Every Senate seat that's up this year, it's half the Senate, so that's 25 state Senate races. There is a Democrat on the ballot in every single one for the first time since 1974.
Oh my God, I didn't realize it had been that long, but yeah.
Yeah, apparently. I guess I didn't know that the rot or the lack of competition even had gone back that far. And at the state house level, there are 91 at least contested seats right now. That's up from, I want to say it was in the 70s just 2 years ago. And there will still be an opportunity to caucus in folks in those other handful of races, I guess, but there's still the bench in as far as Indiana Democrats go is still pretty non-existent down at the county level. Your clerks, your treasurers, your trustees, there's still a ton of empty spots on the ballot right
but
there.
When I was talking to the head of Independent Indiana, let me ask you, if you had to guess how many people, because you know how hard it is to run as an independent, you have to go out and get all of these signatures. Okay. If you had to guess in the last 2 cycles, how many people ran for office as independents in Indiana, and most of these offices are local, mayors and council and whatever. How many would you guess?
Boy, I've had Nathan on the show. And,
okay, then
well, no, but and it's been months, boy, the Trump administration just fries your brain. You forget things that happened, last week, let alone, boy, in October, I think, when I had him on, but I don't remember the exact number. I want to say it's in the low hundreds, maybe.
No, it was 240.
Okay,
and the percentage of those people who won was 52%.
Yes.
And that is with the additional problems that you encounter, the extra signatures you have to get, all of that. 2 of them were mayors of very theoretically red places,
Mm-hmm.
Huntington and Bedford. You know, I mean, I think that voters in Indiana do want competition, and they do want, and they're not wedded to the Republicans who are in local office. But we haven't given them, obviously, uh, enough alternatives. And in more rural areas, I do think there is this belief that God wants you to vote Republican, because there's the
Or at
theory
least
that
not Democrat, right?
are not Democrat. Yeah, the theory is that if a rutabaga with an R by its name gets elected, so but I think that's a sign of, now what would the people who have your structure, your the box that you're putting this in, what would they say that means? Are we getting to a new change, and if so, what sort?
Well, I think that is a sign of us being in this sort of crisis period, this
Mhm.
turning over, this churn. You can see that we're sort of changing the axes that we fight on. You know, if we go back all the way to the New Deal era, right? We sort of the parties were at odds over economics,
Yeah.
and and it shifted to become over culture issues.
Oh, yeah.
And I think we're switching to come back to being where we're fighting over economics again. You see folks on the far left and the far right are, they both have a criticism of capitalism or corporatism,
Mhm.
as you would say, and understand that the mainstream that is captured, oh, everything is not serving the mass of people terribly well. Now, currently, we disagree wildly over what to do about it,
Yeah.
but that I think is why we are where we are. I don't know.
I think it's gotten the new Gilded Age has gotten
Hmm.
too big to ignore, and because we have a mentally disabled president, um, we're going to see a lot worse uh, economically, and that is going to raise the salience of economics even further.
100%. Well, boy, you're seeing it right now with this
Yeah,
Iran stuff. I mean, boy,
yeah.
you didn't plan that well, did we? We've built our entire
I
economy
don't think he can
on this.
spell plan. You know, his
If you lit it stones,
vocabulary and his mental capacities stopped at around third grade, and that may be kind.
well, so I guess with the little time we have left, you know, we we talked about this corporatism, right? And sort of the merger of corporation and state. There was an Italian guy about 100 years ago who had a name for that. I think it was
Yeah.
Mussolini, and he called it fascism.
Yes. Yes.
And and you seem to think we're going to have free and fair elections this year, and it's going to go off with not without a hitch, but
Oh, no.
mostly without a hitch. And Democrats are going to take the House, at least, maybe even the Senate, and then do something about it.
Yes.
So you think the system's going to hold?
If I, I certainly hope so. I really do. There are numerous legal organizations that are fighting all of these efforts to suppress the vote. And at least at the lower court levels, they're winning. And they're winning massively. I mean, because we have a president who couldn't spell Constitution and doesn't obey the law. And we fortunately have the lower courts are still okay. I will tell you that the thing that has upset me probably more than anything else is the current corruption of the Supreme Court and the
Mm.
majority. I mean, that I would never, when I went to law school, I mean, the Supreme Court was my, you know, it is scary when you have a Supreme Court that is looking for ways around long settled law. I mean, it has been incredibly disappointing. But yes, I do think we're going to have, I don't know, there will be places where it will not be fair and free. But I think overall, we're going to have an election, and it's going to tell us whether there's a future for the United States. Which reminds me, I hope that you will be out with a sign on Saturday at a No Kings.
I'll tell you what, we've had long-standing plans to be in Cincinnati this weekend. We're seeing a show Friday night, and I think we're going to attend the rally there.
I don't care where, but everybody needs to be there. My sister, who was never, she's an artist, and she was never political. And my brother-in-law, her husband, was our family right winger, which is not real right wing. I mean, he voted for Obama. He's not crazy. But they've been to she has back problems and she has medical problems. And she was in front of Todd Young's office with her walker and a sign that said, "I may not have a good spine, but I have one."
Amazing. That's brilliant. So, yeah, and I guess that's where we have to leave this thing today. Sheila, I could pick your brain all night. There's so much in there, and we barely scratched the surface of the things you've seen and what
I can't even find my brain these days, but thank you.
Well, so you might not be able to find your brain, but you still manage to put out prolific amounts of content on your website. You're blogging daily. You've always got an essay, and it's always a good read. So I guess if the folks out there are listening and they're not already reading you, where can they find you?
It's SheilaKennedy.net.
Well, you heard the lady, folks. Professor Sheila Kennedy, thank you so much for being here with me tonight. It is an honor to have you. Stick around. I'm going to send you backstage while I do my little closing bit here. Stick around after the credits, and I will be with you to give you the proper thank you and goodbye. But for now, I really do appreciate you being here with us tonight.
Thank you for having me.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, that was the legend Sheila Kennedy with us here on Who's Left Live. Thank you for being with us as well. Once again, a reminder to please consider supporting Who's Left and the wider Progressive Indiana network with a paid subscription if you're able. This independent media project relies solely on the generosity of kind patrons like you to make this information available for free to everybody. Again, that is at progressiveindiana.net. We could also really at Progressive Indiana Network on Facebook, Instagram, and Threads. Please subscribe to our YouTube channel at the same handle, and over on Blue Sky and TikTok, you can find us at PIN Indiana. You can find me on most social media sites at Who's Left. Again, that's HOOS Left. You can send me a direct message anywhere with feedback, tips, ideas, and concerns, or email me directly at scott@whosleft.us. Please tune in this Sunday morning on these same channels for Who's Left This Week, Indiana's only truly progressive Sunday morning news and politics show. Love to have you there in the chat as well. Again, help us keep building this project in a truly democratic state, one conversation at a time. Until the next one, this has been the Who's Left podcast. I'm Scott Aaron Rogers. Love each other, Indiana.